The next person we are going to meet is one of, I mean, sometimes you meet people that are incredibly impressive in what they've done professionally. They've just done a lot of cool stuff and very successful things. The next speaker has, I think it's 4 successful exits in Silicon Valley. She's investing in a lot of cool companies, advising a lot of cool companies. She's also doing phenomenal things in the non-profit sector, or not necessarily non-profit sector, but very purpose-driven sector, as a chairman of Kiva, the leading lending, peer-to-peer lending site where you can crowdfund, and there's over 1 million entrepreneurs around the world, often in very disadvantaged areas, that have been able to lend money from Kiva. And the cool thing is that over 99% of the money is being repaid, so they're actually better than a normal bank. Apart from that, she's a fantastic thinker and somebody I've been longing to get here for a long time. Please get up. Julie Hanna, come up here. Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
Please have a seat in the sofa. So,
thank you for such a warm welcome.
No, but you deserved it.
Thank you.
You know, you're doing very, very cool things. And you're coming from a cool place, Silicon Valley. So I'd like to start out with that. We heard some things from Mark and some others about Silicon Valley and sort of a mindset. How is it to create with Silicon Valley as a base? And now I'm first interested in you as an entrepreneur and as an investor and somebody that creates companies.
Well, I would say Silicon Valley looks a lot like here. And I think it's a sign of the times. This panel, it's actually a great follow-on question to the panel that you just had. I think if I closed my eyes and forgot where I was, that could easily have been a conversation in the heart of the valley. And I don't think I would have said that. That would have been the case even 3 years ago. I've been traveling to the UK, to Europe since 2006 as a part of kind of just trying to democratize tech entrepreneurship and export sort of learnings from Silicon Valley. And over time, I've seen this sort of collapsing of differences, because I think we've gone from a data-driven environment to an information democratized environment, and we're moving up sort of our, I call it the tech version of Maslow's hierarchy. You know, we start with data, we've moved up to information, and now we're really democratizing knowledge. And as a result of that, you have very, very similar things going on. So, you know, trends in Silicon Valley are much of what you've seen here over the past 2 days. The thing you just hit on, actually, in this panel is we are obsessed with codifying everything because we're technologists. So a lot of things that used to be considered sort of a black art, say the black art of SEO or the black art of hacking certain things, we're obsessed with codifying them, and so we're very metrics and data driven around these things. You know, we've codified the way we do startups with, Eric Ries did a brilliant job of that with Lean Startup. So that's kind of one big trend. I would say the other big trend, if you sort of step back, is our technology is moving closer to humanity. So what you have happening is we used to be about transactions and computing's over here and we live our lives here, but now tech is becoming an extension of the way we do everything. It's moving into our physical world, the Internet of Things, the driverless car, the wearable devices. It's moving inside of us, right, with what's happening in med tech, which is very exciting. And the last thing I would just say about what's happening in Silicon Valley is there are sort of 2 thrusts of companies being started. There are the companies that are really about the roots of Silicon Valley, which are very change the world driven, that are based on really taking advantage of a discontinuous innovation to either pioneer something that was never possible before or disrupt an existing industry.
For the reason, just the hell of it, see if it can be done. It's like the curiosity of the creators.
Yeah, yeah. I just realized I'm being a bit long-winded.
No,
so
not at all. I'm in awe, so just continue. But so just sort of said, so one type of companies are created just to see if it's, you know, can we disrupt this? That's one thing. What's the other type of reason for creating the companies?
So the other part is sort of more of a phenomenon, I think, of how cheap and quick and easy it is to experiment and start things, and then the inflow of risk capital or angel investing that's kind of given birth to a lot of startups. And so it's a lot more about kind of incremental innovation. So it's I call it I've got the next Angry Birds killer sort of company and entrepreneurs. And what's most exciting to me are the discontinuous innovations, and the three industries that have not been truly disrupted yet by technology are kind of standing there waiting to be knocked down. It's the healthcare, kind of medical industry, the education markets, and then the financial world. And we have some innovations right now that are just lining up, and it's a very exciting time around those three industries.
So you had 4 exits. Is that? It's 4 exits by now. No exits since we last spoke. That was yesterday. Good. What makes you start another company?
I think for me at this point to start another company, it would have to be something, and this is always my advice to anybody who's thinking about it, is something I'm so 24/7 obsessed by, I can't stop thinking about it, and that it's something that I believe I'm uniquely in a unique position to do something about. I'd have to be convinced of those two, and then the third is I'd have to be convinced that I've got enough energy and I'm not too over the hill. So.
But Kiva must have been such a project. What is Kiva? You're the chairman of Kiva. Could you just share a little bit on sort of the Kiva journey?
Yeah. How many of you know what Kiva is? Familiar? Okay, so it looks like about maybe a third. So Kiva basically brought micro-lending to the internet and made it a person-to-person experience so that anybody with access to an internet connection could make a loan to another person. And our focus was on the little-known fact, 3 billion people in the world, which is roughly half the planet, don't have access to capital, the kind of capital we take for granted in getting loans. And so our focus was those people, and most of them are actually micro-entrepreneurs. They're sort of the world's invisible entrepreneurs. We're over here in our world talking about the democratization of entrepreneurship, but it turns out that most of the world are actually entrepreneurs, and we don't notice them. So we've really sort of democratized access to capital to that part of the world, and we've scaled to having over 1 million entrepreneurs in 73 countries, loaning about $500 million over 8 years. And what really that act of bringing micro-lending to the internet, making it person-to-person, really gave birth to crowdfunding, what we now know as crowdfunding. And collectively, I think today there are about 700 and something crowdfunding marketplaces. If you just look at the top half, like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Lending Club, which I'm an investor in, and Kiva, we've loaned billions of dollars to millions of people. And so it's like unleashing citizen lenders. And so my perspective of kind of really what is important and relevant here in terms of how it can upend old banking mindset is that no bank could have enough loan officers that would equal the millions of citizen lenders out there that are really crowdsourcing loans. So it's unleashing a bunch of capital that's been sitting on the sidelines.
And you're for me, you're a type of leader, sort of the new phase of leadership, a type of leader that's purpose-driven, still very results-driven. But do you see that as something coming from Silicon Valley, or do you see that as a trend or a mindset, or is it a new generation thinking differently? It's very far from sort of profit-maximizing, often gray-haired older men, in sort of you see in movies.
Yeah. Well, I think whenever a sea change happens, an inflection point happens, it's because there's a convergence of a number of factors. So there's sort of a global shift, and I think it's the shift towards humanism, kind of a shift from a thing-centered sort of society to a human-centered way of living. I think it's a backlash response to the narrative, Gordon Gekko's narrative in Wall Street of, greed is good. Markets are driven by fear and greed. And I think we've ended up sort of with this winner-take-all mentality around success.
I have that effect on people sometimes, I'm sorry.
I don't think I need to say any more. Like,
I think that was a very greed is good, and then sex.
sex is good. But I'm in Sweden. You all know that here, so.
But on a more serious note, I feel that too. I think we're moving towards humanism in a sense, and I think that the reason is the internet.
Yeah.
It becomes transparent if you're an asshole. People don't like companies that are not genuine, and this drives behavior. And then there's a new generation people. I think, if I quote you correctly, you said there's a self-correcting younger talent, not allowing larger companies to do what they want to do.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. People don't have to talk about the dehumanizing effect of technology, but I actually believe in its humanizing effect. And if you ever see a picture of the internet, it looks to me like the connective tissue of humanity. It looks like this one single organism. We're all nodes off of this organism. And so what it's really teaching us is how interconnected we are, that what used to feel global is now able to happen globally, and what is global feels local. So when you look at that, we are not, technology is the thing between us that connects us. In Silicon Valley, we prize two things more than anything. We prize technology and we prize people. And we call them talent. They're not employees, they're owners, and it's talent. And it's different when you think of it that way. So we've gone from, we use technology to optimize and automate absolutely everything, not just to build products, but anything to be automated, we do it, and that's how we build fast growth companies. On the talent side, we've moved into, as we try to figure out how to scale up companies, really hacking human potential. We hack everything, and we're hacking human potential. So it's the quantified self. It's looking, kind of saying, how do you maximize someone's performance? How do you get them to reach peak potential? We're in a war for talent, and it's not about, I'm going to pay you more and give you more equity. And oh, by the way, it's millennials. So I call millennials the self-correcting mechanism in humanity. So we've all been chasing, success, and we sort of have this gnawing feeling of emptiness while we're surrounded by all of the things we've acquired through success. And we've raised children who've watched us and said, if that's your idea of success, we have a new idea of success. And so I think societally and individually, we are all hungry. There's a real hunger for to be a part of something bigger than ourselves and for meaning, and to integrate that with our work, to do work that is worthy of our lives, not just having a job, and that's driving a lot of it.
I think that's worth a little. We are gonna invite a friend of ours who is also in the US right now, and we're going to invite a fantastic gentleman who is sitting here next to us. So first of all, Rai Kumar, please come up from Devex. Welcome, welcome. And we're going to invite Andrew McLaughlin, who is an old-time SIME speaker. Hi, Andrew.
Peace out, man. How's it going?
Andrew has been one of the you made the rules for the internet way back when. I think I wrote in the program the Gandalf of the internet, and you've also been the chief policy.
You can tell from my haircut.
Chief policy officer globally of Google, and you've been the deputy CTO of the United States in the Obama administration, and now you're at BetaWorks as an entrepreneur in residence. Then we have, sorry, and then we have Raj. Devex, Devex might not be as well known as the White House or Google here, but it's a fantastic creation that you've created. Could you share what that is?
Sure, absolutely. We work in development, and thanks to Bono and Angelina Jolie, I can now say that, and at least some people know what I mean. I don't mean web development, I don't mean real estate development, I mean global development. One of the industries that still also hasn't been disrupted, that's getting disrupted, is development. It's the $200 billion a year that goes from rich countries to poor countries to try to address the poverty in the world, right, which is staggering. And we are the media platform that covers that industry. So we have 500,000 members. These are aid workers, people work in Haiti and Darfur and places like that. These are the NGOs and government agencies and companies, increasingly companies, who are working in this space. So we try to knit all those people together in an online professional network and then inform them with information and knowledge and insights into what's happening in this space.
So you're a combination of the LinkedIn and the TechCrunch for people that do really cool things to help other people.
That's right.
So this is the starting field, and what I would like to do, starting with you, Andrew, we started discussing global issues that can be addressed by technology, looking at sort of some of the industries. But if you look from your vantage point, what are the things you think technology can be really good at addressing from sort of making the world a better place perspective?
Well, I'm a big fan of individual self-expression, and I know that that's kind of like an easy starting point, but it still is magical to me that I can sit down in front of my computer and I can read a tweet or a blog post or a news update from Zimbabwe, from Syria, from Moscow. It's quite magical, and you know, any 16-year-old today with access to some kind of a computer and internet connection can reach anybody else in the world. They can write, they can communicate, they can speak. And so I know in a funny way that's kind of like an obvious and an easy place to start this discussion, but individual self-expression and the ability of people to connect with each other across the world is the starting point. So to me, what's super interesting right now is the ability of those capabilities plus this computer science principle called abstraction, which is the idea that, you know, if I want to build an iPhone app, let's say, I don't have to write all of the code to handle gestures. You know, I don't have to write all of the code to interpret a GPS location from a phone. We've abstracted those capabilities and turned them into little libraries and software packages that we can build on top of. So when you take individual self-expression and the innovative capability that comes from abstraction and comes from what Julie called automation, but turning more and more things into reliable components that you can build on top of, that allows people in Nairobi and in Lusaka and in Rio de Janeiro to build businesses that can reach global scale, be competitive, provide new services in a matter of weeks rather than months or years. And that, I think, is the most exciting thing, because ultimately development is about capital formation. It's about people becoming wealthier. And the way people are going to become wealthier is by providing services that essentially they can instantaneously export to markets all over the world.
Raj?
Yeah, I think that principle is exactly right, and it's fundamentally changing the way we look at some of the big global challenges. Because in the development space, in the humanitarian and charitable space, we often looked at the world's poor as sort of out there. We don't know who they are. We're sending money from Stockholm or Washington, D.C. to help them. And now, because of technology, we see a whole mindset shift. You can talk to the world's poor. They're people too. They're not just beneficiaries. They can be fully engaged in their own development, right? And so it's changing the way we look at this industry entirely. It's sort of like in government. Government services were often thought of, and still are in many ways, as something the government just does for you. And increasingly there's the idea that, no, you're the customer, and the government's got to provide a great service. Well, in development, we're starting to look at people in the world who need help. They need immunizations, or they need education, or they need, you know, whatever service is required in the place where they live, food, to look at them as customers in a way, and equal partners in their own development. That would not be possible if we couldn't connect to them directly, which nowadays we actually can.
But I'm curious to see what were the discussions in the White House, and what sort of Obama's thinking on technology. He won the election through technology. That's sort of what many people say. What do you think, what were you guys discussing there? How do you think technology can sort of be used to build society?
Well, you can tell what we were not discussing adequately, which was how to make healthcare.gov work. There was a slogan in the White House from the time that I joined the transition through the 2 years that I was there that you still hear a lot, which is that technology isn't the solution to any problem, but it's part of the solution to every problem. And that was the way that we tried
to... the technology is not the solution to every problem, but it's part of the solution to any problem. That's a great quote.
Yeah, it's not the solution to anything. Like, there's nothing that we can just go and fix with technology. But any problem that government is trying to tackle, whether it's education, healthcare, a renewable energy future, the internet in particular, and broadly speaking, technology is part of the solution. And so that's a mindset change. In other words, It's very interesting right now, this moment where the United States government is trying to roll out a nationwide health insurance program. It's the first time that we've seen the government basically take something which in the past would have been viewed as a bureaucracy, and instead is trying to launch it as a product. So, instead of standing up an agency, the government has tried to build a web infrastructure that pulls together different databases, all these different health insurance companies, gives individuals the ability to log in, see options, choose one, sign up, and so forth. And what's amazing to see is how terrible government is at building products. And so if you think about the sort of Silicon Valley product mentality, and that word is always sort of a funny word because typically in English anyway, when you think of a product, you think of something tangible and physical, and in Silicon Valley we apply it to packages of software that you launch. But anyway, if you apply the product mentality to what government does, then you need to change the way that you build. You need to do something much more like a structured lean startup approach if you're going to get it right, which is to say build, launch, iterate, and test all the way through. What we saw with healthcare.gov is what happens when an old hierarchical bureaucratic structure with rules 20 years out of date tries to build a 2013 quality product.
But do you see any business opportunities? So is doing good, is that a business opportunity, or is it something done for other reasons?
So I always find this an interesting question because part of my mission is to break down that either or mindset that we've been taught that you either do good or you're making money. Every company I ever started was mission driven or helped build in Silicon Valley. I mean, we think that way. We're about changing the world. If you think about the continuum of save the world, I think of the world as save the world, change the world, exploit the world. It's not the do good or make money. So where are you in that continuum? The change the world is about being purpose and mission driven. And the key is to how do you have a sustainable model around that? And making money is a way of being sustainable. So that's a long answer to say doing good is probably the best place to start in terms of making money.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's in a way, there's a false wall between those things. It's starting to break down. I think it's one of the great things about this convergence moment that we're in. If you look at, say, Starbucks, right? For Starbucks to be a successful company, they need to have a great source of coffee. That coffee is largely grown in developing countries. They need the coffee to be very high quality, but they need it to come from farmers who don't mess up the environment, from farmers that aren't using child labor. They need to make sure that their suppliers are themselves healthy and educated. And so they actually have a business interest in what happens in the developing world, and even down to the level of the smallholder farmer. So we're getting into this new paradigm where you don't have to ask the question either or. The best businesses of the future will, of course, be doing good, and their values and their social mission will be embedded into their business model.
So interesting statistic, there's a recent study that showed that 88% of respondents indicated that sort of the social impact of the companies that they either went to work for, invested in, or bought products from was either essentially important or very important. So there is this shift to where it's becoming an imperative to business. And we were talking on our panel yesterday. I recently had spent some time with Indra Nooyi, the CEO of PepsiCo. She's worried about this. She's thinking about how do we change Pepsi's brand to mean something that represents sort of a value that our customers can connect with, because millennials need to connect with that, beyond brown sugary water. What does PepsiCo represent? So it's become a business imperative.
But that's, one of the companies that have been at the forefront of that is Google. And you were the chief policy officer. You went around telling governments how to be a little bit more googly. Could you share sort of what happened in the cockpit? What kind of conversations did you have with Larry and Sergey around the issues of purpose?
So let me step back just a second and just follow on to something that Julie said, and then I'll answer the question, Ola. So one of the things that I think is incredibly interesting about the moment that we're in right now is that there used to be this kind of like pitched battle between the notion of charity and the notion of for profit. And one of the things that's so interesting right now is that we've seen this kind of like left-right convergence. It's a fragile convergence, but a left-right convergence around the idea that the best way to do good for the world is through sustainable business models. And so what's so interesting about that to me is if you think about a business like Tom's, the shoemaker.
Sorry, like what?
Tom's, the
Tom's
shoemaker.
shoes, yeah.
Yeah, so Tom's gets a lot of great press and people love it. And what they say is like, you buy one pair and we give one away. One of the things that we've started to realize is how short-sighted and foolish these kinds of approaches are. So for example, with shoes, if you're in the shoe business in Ghana and all of a sudden some kind of alien force comes in and starts dropping free shoes into the country, you can't compete. Like, how can you sell and become wealthier and become successful as a Ghanaian business person if somebody else is coming in and giving free stuff away? At Google, I got involved in this in one way, which is that we became a financial backer because of Larry and Sergey in something called One Laptop Per Child. One Laptop Per Child was the idea that you would give away tons of very cheap computing devices. The problem, of course, is that if what you really want is a sustainable economy, you need to have Ghanaians or Kenyans be able to sell computers. And the only way to sell computers is if there isn't somebody coming in from the outside and parachuting hundreds of thousands of free computers into the ecosystem. One of the learning experiences at Google about this kind of thing was that actually being a really good Google with local offices and local staff and local people is the best way to contribute to capital formation and the countries where you're working and becoming wealthier. That was, one of the interesting learnings that we went through when I was there. Just be good at being Google and do that very well and don't try to give large sums of money away. And you can see, by the way, today, this kind of incoherent tentativeness of the argument play out in the fact that Google.org is kind of unclear what it is or what it does or how it works. And that's because within Google, there are a lot of debates and conflicts about the best way for a large company with a lot of money to actually do good in the world. The old model of a big foundation writing big checks to give free stuff to people is clearly not the way to do it. A better way to do it are things like Kiva, like DevX, like the many businesses which blend mission, purpose, and sustainable business models by being unashamed to make money.
But when you read the newspapers, you read a lot of, you get a very biased and sensation-driven view. You who sit in the middle of all these people, is there a case for optimism or for pessimism?
I think it's a great case for optimism, but that's not to understate the challenges. There's 1 billion people in the world living on less than $1.25 a day. The kind of global goal that everyone's coming together around is that we can actually end that, literally end it, by 2030. And it looks possible. Very difficult, but possible. And part of the reason it's possible is that this development industry, this charity sector is changing. And it's not changing in the sense that it's just getting smaller or something. It's actually getting bigger. It used to just be charity, and now it's adding on long-term development and sustainable business practices and corporations. So I think there's actually room for all of it. I think there's room for traditional charity. There are people who literally need it, but it can't end there. And so we're now in a place where there's an opportunity, and I think you can see this in many countries and be very optimistic. I was just in Western Kenya visiting some villages there and seeing really exciting entrepreneurial models. In the old days, what we used to consider success in our industry was often how big your NGO was. Our budget is bigger than your budget sort of thing. And we're heading toward people saying, look, I can prove that I can make a real change here at this little village level. I can actually improve some things working in partnership with local people. And I don't need to take that to the next village. I can just make that open source and let anybody pick it up, government, other organizations, local charities. So we're getting into a new ecosystem in the doing good sector that I think is cause for a lot of optimism.
Optimism or pessimism? We're running towards the end of a fantastic discussion, but I want to know, is it bad or good going forward? Andrew? It's funny because we're pointing at you here at the...
Actually, what I love about the camera configuration here is that I'm looking at you guys from an audience perspective, and I've always wanted at your conference, Ola, to be able to stand up from the audience and yell at you. It's great. So I'm incredibly optimistic. From where I sit, the economies of the developing world are the best economies around the world. The increasing distribution of wealth is one of the great phenomena of our age. Obviously, highly imperfect, much to be done, and so forth. But the trend lines are as good as they've ever been. And the technological tools at our disposal mean that the ability of people to create businesses, grow businesses across national lines has never been greater.
I'm optimistic for a whole bunch of reasons, not the least of which that Science is catching up to our humanity and is quantifying a lot of things, a lot of wisdom that we have long known but have maybe become disconnected from. And one of the most compelling ones is that they've now discovered, the neuroscience, that the act of giving stimulates the same pleasure center of the brain that drugs and sex do. There was my sex Freudian slip earlier. So all of a sudden, something that's actually good for the world, what used to be sort of the exclusive domain of illegal and illicit acts is now something that's good for the world. So that's probably the most compelling reason for me to be optimistic.